includes setting up community vaccination sites nationwide. It funds the Defense Production Act, something I've been calling for since last March, to boost domestic production of critical PPE and increase capacity for vaccine production, something the president has already started. To get kids back in school, the bill provides nearly $130 billion to help K-12 schools reopen safely. And I think we've got provisions in there to tell the states they've got to get the money out to the schools quickly. This will let schools do things like repair ventilation systems, reduce class sizes, purchase PPE, and deal with learning loss immediately and over the longer term, which is a huge casualty really of this pandemic, our kids learning. It'll put dollars in Americans' pockets by fulfilling the president's promise to provide $2,000 a person in direct assistance, with checks of $1,400 following the $600 down payment that we enacted in December. It also extends federal supplemental unemployment benefits through September 6th and exempts up to $10,200 in unemployment benefits received during 2020 from federal income taxes for households making less than $150,000. I've been pushing with my colleague from Iowa, Congresswoman Axne, to make sure families don't get hit with this surprise tax while they're still dealing with the pandemic's effects. So I'm especially proud to have gotten that done. If you think about it, someone who's had this big disaster, they've been unemployed, we've gotten them assistance, and all of a sudden they get taxed on it in a time of great difficulty for them. So that was important to me. This bill also makes the child tax credit fully refundable for 2021 and increases the annual amount from the current $2,000 per child to $3,000 or $3,600 for kids under 6. Currently, because the child tax credit isn't fully refundable, there are 27 million children who don't get its full value because their parents don't earn enough. A Columbia University study found that this policy will cut the US child poverty rate in half. I mean, that just makes me feel great. Finally, the American Rescue Plan is going to get people back to work. It helps small businesses that our communities love. And Mayor Piana, I have to say, I remember standing in a small business in Ferndale at the beginning of this problem with you and County Executive Coulter. Oh, so much trouble they've had. It provides $7.25 billion in additional funding for the Paycheck Protection Program. It funds a new program to aid restaurants and bars like the one we were in specifically. It protects the smallest businesses first. $5 billion is set aside for establishments that had less than $500,000 in annual revenue in 2019. Another thing that we need to get Americans back to work is childcare. Any parent on this call knows that Americans miss more work than they ever have on account of childcare challenges last year. Women accounted for 84% of those who missed work in the average month last year due to childcare issues. This bill provides $39 billion for childcare providers and financial relief for families struggling to cover tuition for childcare. Keeping providers open and affordable will help relieve the burden that parents, especially moms, have been dealing with for a whole year now. On top of that, the bill provides $350 billion for states and localities to keep first responders, frontline healthcare workers, and other essential workers on the job. Since this pandemic began, 1.4 million of these workers, state and local public employees, have lost their jobs due to the tight budgets caused by the pandemic. And if anybody remembers the Great Recession, it lasted much longer and we came out of it much too slowly because we failed to aid our local governments. This is something I fought for from the beginning of this pandemic. We were able to introduce legislation with four of my colleagues to get money directly to local governments with less than 500,000 people Finally, we got it in the HEROES Act and the HEROES 2, but those weren't passed. We delivered it yesterday. The president's going to sign it. And that's what brings us to our guests to talk more about why this provision and others they care to discuss are so important. I want to turn it over to a couple of our great partners who've been working so hard to protect their communities throughout this crisis. Mayor Mike Taylor of Sterling Heights, one of our biggest cities, and Mayor Melanie Piana of Ferndale, one of our smaller cities. So are we going to Mike first? The floor.
Yes, Mayor Taylor, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you, Jenny. First off, I just want to say how proud I am to work with you, Congressman Levin. One of the first calls that I received back on in March of 2020 was from Congressman Levin, and Congressman Levin personally and his office have been true partners over this past 12 months. When it was sourcing PPE to getting our firefighters tested, to making sure that our residents had the resources they need. This has been a true partnership, and I appreciate and thank you for it. And this day, today, tomorrow in particular, is a long time coming, because cities, just like families and just like businesses, have felt the strain of this virus and this pandemic. And for a while, it felt like we were just getting beat up on rather than getting the help that we needed. We were being told that we've suffered from mismanagement for year after year. We've been told that we don't deserve the money because it's just going to plug pension benefits or something like that. Well, I can tell you this money is going to directly help provide the services that residents and businesses in Sterling Heights need. We're going to continue to have our emergency first responder services. We're going to continue to be able to be fixing potholes in our roads. We're going to continue to do all of the things that our residents and businesses deserve and need. And we need it now more than ever. So this is a great day for every city across the country who is going to finally be getting the direct assistance that they need. And I'm just very proud to have been able to work with you, Congressman Levin, to see this through. And I thank you for all of your support and help in doing it. You know, like I said, this is not just going to be something that we can stash away, you know, put it in a rainy day fund. The rainy day is here and we need it. And we need to be able to continue providing those services that I outlined, and the services that happen in the background without residents even really thinking about it and knowing it. Very excited for our residents and the residents of every city in this country that are going to be getting the relief so that those critical services can continue. So with that, I want to thank you, Congressman Levin. Thank you for your partnership and all the support that you know your office has been fantastic too to work with. And I'm happy that we see light at the end of the tunnel now. That not just what the cities are getting, but what the federal government is doing here is really setting us up to come out of this pandemic, recover from it, and emerge stronger. So thank you for your vote, Congressman Levin, and for your partnership.
Thanks so much, Mayor Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Some of our Facebook followers are telling us how nice it is to finally hear some positive comments. So this is just, it is a really nice mood shift for all of us. Breath of fresh air, someone also just commented. All right, with that, Mayor Piana, we're so excited to hear from you as well.
Yes, thank you for inviting me here today. And like Mayor Taylor, I'm just really honored to be a part of this conversation, but also highlight the partnership between Congressman Levin and the cities. You guys have been fabulous throughout the entire response and recovery effort, and we couldn't be this far along without your advocacy efforts. But I also want to come through this also from the Michigan Municipal League and the National League of Cities. I'm heavily involved in both, and they have been staunch partners with cities, villages, and townships, making sure that our voices are heard at the federal level about the need for direct investment back into our cities as part of the recovery efforts. And let me tell you a couple of stories of how we're going to approach this investment and where some of our gaps have come up through this last year. But ultimately what this means for Ferndale of the American Rescue Plan is $1.9 million coming to the city of Ferndale. And I can tell you that money is going to go back to into our programs and services, because we have taken a hit, particularly in Parks and Rec. A lot of cities have lost and laid off their part-time recreation staff from the programs, and services that were canceled because of the pandemic. And the money, this investment comes really at a great time because cities are starting their budgeting processes right now. And so we can, as a team with city council and our city staff, and with input from our residents, really say, how can we best leverage this money? Where are we going to fill in the gaps? And what else do we need to invest in to make sure that the recovery is supported for all of our residents and businesses? So, we have lost 1.5 million in parking revenue because of the lack of businesses. And, that is a fee for use type of service, and that helps us pay off our municipal bond. So that is one priority area conversation I'll be having with council of like, how do we get back to neutral in that parking fund? But also looking at our police and fire, where we have had some reductions and funds paying for those services, as well as DPW, which was something that is their frontline workers as well. But we're also talking about our small businesses and how do we best support them going forward. And the investment from the federal government, again, for the smaller business, particularly minority owned and women owned businesses, is really going to be something we're focusing on through our Downtown Development Authority. And then direct assistance to families. We have 14% of our residents who live at the poverty or below poverty line in Ferndale. So the $1,600 additional dollars going direct to households is really going to help them navigate the next 6 months. And I talk about the vaccination and COVID as a crescendo and decrescendo. I'm playing my musical background here, but we're decrescendoing our an amount of COVID cases as we crescendo up our vaccinations. And, as I'm one of the people on the low priority age and health list, so I'm last on the list to get vaccinated. So any more money and a federal strategy to help get our community and folks like me vaccinated sooner rather than later is something I would like to do, because I want to see my residents back in real live person without a mask because we miss everybody. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me here. And this truly is a regional partnership, small cities working with larger cities, with the county. We all need to be in this together. And I just really appreciate your hard fought efforts at the federal level representing our communities.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Mayor Piana. All right, we have a few reporters on the line with us. If you have a question, feel free to looks like Mark has already unmuted. Mark's been following the state and local funding closely. So Mark, go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, Congressman Mark Head with the Oakland Press. Thank you for doing this call. I have a question for Mayor Taylor. As Mayor Piana just mentioned, the $1.98 million for her community, Sterling Heights slated to receive $20.23 million. Just talk about how big of an impact that funding will have on your community and what services that will help to provide.
Yeah, so we were looking at about a $20 million shortfall over these next couple years from lost revenue, whether it be lost revenue sharing, whether it be lost tickets and fines. We don't have as much parking revenue as they do in Ferndale. In fact, we have pretty much none. But we do have, we have a large city, and there's a lot of fine revenue that we get from just traffic fines. And so with all the decreased activity, we're projecting millions of dollars of lost revenue. And we already have seen that lost revenue in 2020. So this is going to plug those holes. It's going to recover that lost revenue that we have so that we can just continue to be providing the services. We're not looking at this as a way to, how are we going to expand services, or how are we going to go hire more people? Or no, we just want to make sure that we can continue to provide the services that the residents have come to expect and deserve. And as I said, we need it now more than any time before. We need to make sure that our our police officers are out there. We need to make sure that our firefighters are out there, particularly. And so this is I breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that we're not going to have to be making those very difficult decisions about laying people off, cutting services, and removing the essentials that we have to provide. Because we have this funding now, we can sort of get back to what we do best and not have to worry about where the money's going to come from.
Jenny, I'm sure you didn't plan this, but this is actually amazing because it's precisely, we heard from Mayor Piana that they had to lay people off. We're hearing from Mayor Taylor, maybe he hasn't, but he would if he didn't get the money to fill his budget gap. And so it's really to roar out of this horrible situation we've been in with a really powerful recovery. Our local governments have to not be they can't be in deficit. And so they have to not have budget shortfalls that forces them to lay even more people off. So I appreciate that. Okay.
I totally planned that, Andy. Thank you.
Thanks. Good
May I
job.
share one more story?
Yes, go ahead, Mayor.
Last year, the second meeting of March was when the shutdown happened, and we were approving 2 grants, a total of $850,000, which is going to come from our general fund for 2 parks, and we had to delay it. And then we went back to all the grantors and said, will you extend our grant and to make sure we can figure out how not to leave this money on the table, because we had no idea how the pandemic was going to impact us financially. And the last council meeting, we finally got the grants approved, but they're like reduction in scope by 50%. So we're not leaving the grant money on the table, but these are about putting ADA compliant crosswalks, or not crosswalks, pathways into our parks, and about improving parks. And we know that how important parks are to public health right now. And so these are some investments where we were making that the pandemic impacted. We reduced scope not to leave the money on the table. But again, here's some priority money coming from the federal government, and we can talk about with council if we're going to reinvest in making sure those parks become whole.
Thank you so much. All right, Chad, we'll go to you.
Yes, Chad Livengood Cranes. Congressman, good to see you. Quick question. Can you kind of talk about big picture, the difference between how this Congress has approached the recovery from this crisis versus the Great Recession? Some people in local government said, the federal government maybe underdid the response to what happened to local governments with the depressed property values. Took almost a decade for some cities to recover, and then this pandemic, and then this approach. How can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you have to start with Joseph R. Biden. I'm happy to talk about the Congress and us, but I think economists said that we've had time to study the Great Recession. It was way longer because the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act was significantly too small. And if you want to toot the horn of the House of Representatives and go to your history, we actually passed a significantly bigger package, and the Senate wouldn't at that time. And they passed what became, the final scope of ARA, which was under $800 billion, I believe. And, we were going towards 6 trillion here in this humongous crisis. So I think we learned that we have to be more robust. But there's another whole thing that happened at that time, Chad, which was we had a Democratic president who maybe didn't have Joe Biden's long history of bipartisanship, demonstrable chapter after chapter of working across the aisle. And so President Obama bent over backwards and spent 18 months, in some cases, and with the not only the Recovery Act, but then with the Affordable Care Act, trying to get Republican votes, and he ended up making a lot of concessions and not getting any votes. Here, Joe Biden made some of us nervous by telling those 10 Republican senators, yeah, come on, let's have a meeting. And I want to hear you. And they came to the White House and they said, you want to do 1.9 trillion, we want to do slightly less than 600 billion. And essentially what he said to them was, bipartisan Joe, who was bipartisan, will be bipartisan. That isn't even remotely in the ballpark of what needs to happen and what I need to do. So I'll see you next time, I'm ready to be bipartisan on the next thing, just like I always have been, but we have to meet the needs of the American people right now. And he has never wavered. 1.9 trillion was what he said at the beginning. And you saw, Chad, how the House passed something the Senate wouldn't pass exactly what we passed. And so we yesterday passed the Senate version. Fine, we made some compromises, but the scope of it and the timing of it, he came in here as president and he got this done. And so I'm really, proud to partner with him, but we did learn some lessons from the Recovery Act, both in terms of the scope of what's necessary and in the speed. And then particularly with local governments, unemployment in the public sector lagged after the Great Recession. And as you said, it took us way too long to come out of it. And I think we're going to come out of this in a very different fashion. To be fair, part of that is just a pandemic. If we could take a public health approach, like Mayor Piana said, really, if we can really crescendo to take her musical analogy, crescendo the vaccines while we decrescendo the cases, we can really roar out of this. Now, I'm going to put on the mask I have right now is the sheet metal occupational training mask. I'm just going to emphasize to people that we're going to have to keep wearing these in public. We're going to have to keep taking care of each other. Care is contagious, caring for each other. Kindness is contagious, and COVID is contagious. And we need to keep spreading kindness and looking out for each other so we can stop the spread of COVID. So we're going to roar out of this, and we're going to take whatever public health measures we need to take care of each other. And we'll be so relieved to get back to those restaurants and bars and hardware stores and, other businesses in Sterling Heights and Ferndale and elsewhere that we love to patronize. And our kids back in school, speaking as a dad of a 10th grader.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chad, for the question. Mark has one more question for you, Congressman.
Congressman, it's obviously a huge undertaking to craft a bill of this size, but also to get the dollars out. We talk about funding and assistance coming soon to residents and businesses across the state, but just talk about, as far as maybe a timeline on when the communities and when residents will actually see, the funding being implemented in their communities.
Well, as you say, Mark, it's so huge, so there will be different parts of it, but the unemployment assistance will be uninterrupted this time. That is great, because in December, we didn't get it done in time to prevent that. So that will happen immediately and continue. The $1,400 checks are teed up. I can't give you an exact date, but I think they will begin to go out very quickly. Really, a lot of this, what I just want to say about this is, I'm just going to share my experience. I had colleagues from other states, like Texas, say, complaining about how we, the Congress, would appropriate money and their states wouldn't use it, and for various reasons, and it got all political. And I didn't even, I'm like, well, we're Michigan, we didn't do that. And then come to find out that our legislature in Michigan when we passed this money, we didn't intend for it to send it to the state and then to launch into a new debate about state policy. This money is meant for businesses, cities, townships, counties, the state itself, for our schools right now. So I don't want to see the state legislature trying to say to the governor, we're not going to move this money through until you agree with us on, some policy. That's not the purpose. Let the state have its own debates about state policy. The money the federal government gives is supposed to get to these mayors and their small businesses and their school systems now. And so we did put some more guardrails around that some of the money has to go out, be spent, go out from the states within 60 days. Depends on the category. But I think we'll have less problem with that. and the money will begin moving. Basically, Mark, the structures that are already in place, like PPP, the 1,400, you know, the checks, will go fastest because we're just replenishing and going. And then some of the other things will take a little more time while they have to make final, you know, like the money, the figures you hear for the cities are estimates. I think they're very close, but the, you know, the federal government agencies will have to make their final determination to get the money out. So some of that will take a few weeks.
Thank you so much, Mark. Okay, Congressman, if we need to wrap up here, but we did get one comment from Facebook. If you could just respond quickly. Andrew Corey said that we must address learning loss. And I know as a member of the House Education and Labor Committee, you would agree. And can you just talk a little bit about how this is going to support our educators and our students?
Yeah, so Andrew, you're so right, first of all. I bet Mayors Taylor and Piana have stories from their own families, their own, you know, constituents about how parents are just, you know, so distraught about this, and it varies by kid. And, you know, people who are more in communities that are poorer or families that have less resources have been affected worse. Kids who are English language learners, kids who are poor, kids who have special needs have been especially hard hit. I think the good news about this is we've learned some lessons since the CARES Act, and this money is much more flexible. I was on Zoom with our superintendents in Southeast Michigan, and they were very happy about the way that we're going to give them this money. So if one school really has some serious, you know, HVAC issues to get back into the school, their filtration or their circulation issues, they may spend more money on that, but they can spend this money. It's not like you must spend this percent on this and this percent on that. If a school system can put all the money towards dealing with learning loss and have like extra summer school or extra tutoring or whatever they think, we're leaving it to local control, whatever they think will deal with learning loss, you know, remediate it. They have that power and that flexibility. And I know they appreciate it. And that's, you know, I'm still a big believer in local education. As a kid who grew up in Berkeley, went to Berkeley public schools, you know, I felt like, I've always felt like that. So I don't know if either of the mayors have anything to say about that, but it's an important issue.
Well, I'll tell you, I have 3 young children, grades 5, 3, and kindergarten. And of course, our friend group is similarly situated folks. And the one thing, other than, you know, my parents and my grandparents, their health, the one thing that keeps me up at night is my children and my children's friends, and how this is going to impact them going forward. That there are a lot of people that have resources that can get pods or send them to private school and keep their kids in the learning environment, in the best learning environment. And for everybody else, it's a challenge that seriously keeps me up at night, that the quicker we can get this back up and running, our schools, get children in the best learning environment possible, the better it is going to be for our entire society and our children. And so that is a major concern of mine, and anything we can do to help, and anything the federal government can do to help get these schools open. I hope you're right, Congressman, that the money can just get released. They can do what they need to do, get the schools back open, but do it safely so that the teachers, the administrators, the parents, and the children, most importantly, are all kept safe.
Thank you so much. We do have one more Facebook question that I think would give both mayors a nice opportunity to talk about the work they're doing. Allison asked about how we anticipate vaccine appointment availability to increase over the coming weeks. And Mayor Taylor, I know you've got some interesting projects underway, and Mayor Piana, you can say something about the partnerships you're doing with the county too.
Yeah, so right now it's really through the county of Macomb, and I understand I'll let Mayor Piana speak about Oakland County, but your best bet is to continue trying to get through it with Macomb County. There are various sites in Macomb County where you can get the vaccine, but the best is to call or go online through the county's website to try to set that appointment. We are doing everything we can to ramp up the availability, but we're still limited by how many doses we're getting through the county. The city is working on a plan right now. We're constructing a drive-through facility at Lakeside Mall, where when phase 2 opens up, which is when everybody can have access to the vaccine, regardless of your age, regardless of your pre-existing condition status. Once that comes online, and we're hoping sooner rather than later, we're hoping we're weeks away instead of months away from that. When the supply ramps up, we're going to be able to just have cars coming in constantly, do thousands and thousands a week. We're planning on it being a mass vaccination site. So we're still in the works with our IT department in terms of how we're going to get those appointments scheduled. But stay tuned. But for right now, continue working through the county and try to get your appointment scheduled through the county if you live in Macomb.
Thank you so much. And Mayor Piana?
And that is my same message for Oakland County residents, particularly Ferndale residents, just to schedule through Oakland County's website and get in line to get vaccinated. And as more vaccines come online, those will be scheduled. I do know that Byer is also taking appointments, and that's how my parents, when my mom is getting vaccinated through Byer, not in Oakland County, but in another county. But they are coming online, and I think also taking a look at where your pharmacies, if you can get in line there, depending on what your how close you are to a vaccination site. What really is different, though, is Ferndale doesn't have a health department. I get this question all the time: is why isn't Ferndale creating their own testing sites like Detroit? Detroit has their own health department, and so they are legally allowed to create these types of testing sites and deployment of vaccinations, whereas we are dependent on the county to make that happen. And I'm working very closely with our county commissioner, Charlie Cavell, who's been great at providing information out to all of the elected officials and back up, as well as through county executive culture. So stay tuned. We're working very hard to make sure that our residents are vaccinated.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Congressman, if you could just tell us a little bit about how we can expect vaccines to the vaccine production to ramp up thanks to this bill, and then take us out and let folks know how to get in touch with our office.
Will do. If you heard the beeps in the background, that's the next vote. So I gotta go vote, but so this is perfect timing. Yeah, vaccines have increased, weekly vaccines going out to the states and then the counties and to the pharmacies and the various programs have increased by 80% since Joe Biden took office. I think that we're going to increase them much more than that over the next 6 to 8 weeks, so that we finally get to the point where our issue isn't scarcity, which is what it has been, as the mayors have both kind of explained, but where we have a different challenge, which is very also really important to get right, which is we have enough vaccine and we've got to manage all the logistics. And I think the state and the counties are working super hard to be ready for that. But I do, the president, when he took office, used the Defense Production Act to work with companies that supply the parts of the vaccines, both the raw materials to make the vaccine itself, and also the parts like the tubes and syringes. And then he used the Defense Production Act, and I was saying, like, hallelujah, to get Merck and Johnson & Johnson to partner. So Merck, a competitor, would say, yeah, we'll temporarily take the intellectual property of Johnson & Johnson, we'll make a facility available, and we'll greatly increase production. That's what we should have been doing for a year. But anyway, we're doing it now. So I think supply of Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson are increasing. They will increase even more. And people like our young mayors here who are not that close to being eligible because of their robust health and youth will be, will get in the game. And I'm glad the governor is, reducing or making more and more people eligible. We also have a lot of great information about the vaccines on our website. You can go to andylevin.house.gov. That's andylevin.house.gov and find up-to-date vaccine information there. And I just really encourage everybody to call our office if you have any problem. And if it's a local problem, we'll steer it to the local governments. But it's 586-498-7122. Sorry for the beeps. 586-498-7122. And, we're just here to help. And, I just finally, Jenny, I just want to thank these great mayors. We can sit here in Washington and try to help get you funds, but ultimately, literally the rubber meets the road in Sterling Heights, in Ferndale, in the other great communities. And I'm so proud that finally this bill gets money to the state and the counties and the biggest cities down, not just to Ferndale, but to a center line in a Bingham Farms, our very smallest, Huntington Woods, our very smallest little jurisdictions. All the townships, all the villages, all the cities will get a proportionate share so they can keep people employed and take care of their residents. And it's just a hopeful time finally. So I'm really glad.
Thank you all so much. I put our website and our phone number in the comments of the Facebook Live as well, so that you can reach us. And I'd also like to thank our speakers for joining us today and all of you who tuned in and for your great questions. And thanks to our speakers for being flexible to stay and answer some more. All right, take care. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman.
Thanks,
Thank
Mayor.